Hello, friends and fellow lovers of all things beachy. Welcome to The Beach Speaks, the podcast that shares stories about the beach and our connection to it. I'm your host and beach lover, Paige Friend, helping you reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. So grab a cool drink, relax in your beach chair, stick your toes in the sand, and enjoy this episode of The Beach Speaks. Many of you have asked, how did I find the nerve to leave my job and move to the beach when I didn't have a job to go to and didn't even know what beach? Where was I going to live? What was I going to do? I would laugh and say, I'm sure whatever beach I go to, there'll be a couple of palm trees where I can hang a hammock, and I don't know, I'll make jewelry out of shells. It sounded silly when I said it out loud, but in my head, it was serious. How did I get here? I've done a lot of thinking about that recently, about the times in my life that I just said, I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm going to do it. It's strange because I always thought of myself as pretty risk averse, not at all fearless. I would rarely try something new if I wasn't reasonably sure that I would be good at it right away. I needed to feel safe. What I keep coming back to is this moment 25 years ago. Imagine, alone, sitting in the left seat of a tiny two-seater Cessna 152, about the size of a Barbie car, at the end of an 11,000-foot runway. My left hand steadily holding the yoke and my right hand resting on the throttle, speaking confidently to the air traffic controller through the microphone on my headset. Lawton Tower, Cessna 3380 Juliet, runway 17, ready for takeoff. And hearing the equally confident controller reply, copy 80 Juliet, cleared for takeoff. My first solo flight. It was only a few months before this that I was sitting in the same position, except my flight instructor was sitting beside me in the right seat, with my foot on the brake, a death grip with my left hand on the yoke, and my right hand nervously holding onto the throttle. I recall turning to him, and through the microphone on my headset, I nervously blurted out, "This is impossible. No one can fly a plane, talk on the radio, and not get lost all at one time. I don't think I can do this." He turned to me with one of those, "Come on now," looks, and through his headset to my ears, I hear in his confident voice saying, "Paige, it is possible, and you are going to do it." I took a deep breath, relaxed my death grip, just enough to press down the microphone button with my thumb, and announced shakily, "Lawton ground, November 3380 Juliet, taxi to runway 17 for VFR departure to the west." Copy 80 Juliet, clear to runway 17 via taxiway Bravo. Hold short and contact tower on 133.5 for departure. I step on the right rudder pedal to turn toward the end of the runway, and then I have to correct with my left foot, and then a little with my right and a little with my left, until I reach the takeoff position. The nose of the plane is facing straight down that runway. A few long seconds later, I remember what to say next. Lawton Tower, November 3380 Juliet, runway 17, ready for takeoff, VFR to the west. Copy, 80 Juliet, clear for takeoff, runway 17. I guess the otherwise solemn and serious controller must have sensed that I was a nervous student pilot because he added in an upbeat voice, "Have a good flight." I released the brakes, push in the throttle and begin rolling down the runway, trying to keep the plane straight with my feet on the rudder pedals, picking up speed 20 knots, 30 knots, and at 50 knots, I pull back slowly on the yoke, and as the plane begins to lift off into the air, the terror turned to thrill. I'm doing it. I'm flying. But of course, you don't go from 0 to private pilot in one flight. There were a few more steps. Getting to the point where I could solo wasn't too difficult. And when I reached the required 10 hours of flying with an instructor, I could take off and land safely, talk on the radio, and navigate around the local airspace without getting lost. But I had no idea when my instructor would give me the sign-off. It was like this big secret. 3 days in a row, I would arrive at the airport in nervous anticipation, like, this is it. I'm going to solo today. And then the wind would be blowing too hard across the runway. Not a big deal for 2 pilots in the plane, but outside the safety limit for a single pilot. It's a weight and balance thing. The 4th day, the weather looked great, except the wind was just barely 1 knot above the threshold. I was beginning to think it was a sign that I wasn't meant to fly a plane. Like in Monopoly, I pulled the do not pass go, do not collect $200 card. Still, I grabbed the pre-flight inspection checklist from inside the cockpit door and did my methodical walk around the plane, checking that the oil, fuel, propeller, landing gear, etc. were okay, and then climbed into the left seat to do all the systems and radio checks, feeling pretty confident that all was in order for a safe flight. And at the same time, my instructor was relaxing in the right seat next to me, just observing, making sure I didn't miss anything. Then I taxied to the runway for a few circles around the airfield and some takeoffs and landings. On the 3rd landing, my instructor said, let's taxi back to the hangar. But just as I was about to swing the plane around to park, he said, stop here. Give me your logbook. My heart sunk into my stomach. I thought, uh-oh, I really must have messed up something. He opened his door and jumped out and turned to me with a smile, yelling over the whirring sound of the engine, go on, you don't need me. You got this. Oh my God, I was going to do this. Then a flood of emotions washed over me. Fear, self-doubt, nervousness. Did I really want to do this? I took a few deep breaths to calm down, telling myself, it's nothing different, just like all those times before. Taxi to the runway, make all the proper radio calls, stop at the end of the runway and wait for the cleared for takeoff. I was so engrossed in doing all the steps correctly, it didn't even occur to me that I was alone until I started my rollout, reaching that magical 50 knots where I pulled back on the yoke and whoa, the plane lifted off a lot faster than I was used to because the weight of my instructor had been removed and it was only me. I was flying. I did 2 circles around the patch. That's pilot speak for around the airfield, before taxiing back to the hangar. My whole body was shaking so much from the adrenaline rush that when I climbed out of the cockpit, I lost my grip on the door while trying to hold on to my headset, checklist, and flight bag, and I slipped on the step below and started toppling backward. It wasn't the most graceful exit. Yeah, I can fly a plane, but I can't get out of one. Fortunately, my instructor was there to catch me. Normally, I would have been totally embarrassed, but this time, all I felt was this overwhelming sense of pride and joy of what I'd just accomplished. Now that I had mastered that solo around the airport, the next big step was a solo cross-country flight. Now, that didn't mean I had to fly across the country, literally. I had to successfully plan and execute a flight over 25 nautical miles to another airport, land, and then return. And by this time, I had flown to other airports in the area to practice, but not very far and not on my own. I was pretty confident in my flight skills, but not so much in my navigation skills. And not only did I need to know how to get to another airport, I had to know what to do when I got there. With the sign-off from my instructor, once again, I'm alone at the end of the runway, waiting for the clear for takeoff, confident in my pre-planning, but a bit fearful of the unknown. To me, this was like a solo flight on steroids. There was so much to think about, and I couldn't help but second-guess myself. What if I forget how to correct my heading and get way off course? Will I remember when to switch radio frequencies? I felt so intimidated listening to the controllers on the radio, calling out instructions at rapid-fire pace. Beechjet 5523 Alpha, 2 miles out, turn left at 090 for arrival on 18. Copy, Beechjet 23 Alpha. And in the next breath, the controller is talking to another aircraft. Cessna 24 Alpha, continue climb at 200, contact departure on 130.5 at 5,000, traffic right at 090, 5 miles out. And the pilot responds confidently, Cessna 24 Alpha, copy. At some point, I was going to have to talk to them. Would I understand their instructions? What if I forget to make my approach call? What if I miss the airport altogether? I practiced all of this at my home airport, and I felt like even when I would get confused and have to ask the tower, say again, the controllers always had my back. I had no idea what it would be like at this other airport. I decided that whenever I had to announce myself on the radio, I would add student pilot. So maybe they wouldn't talk so fast, and if I was lucky, they'd give me a little extra direction. Once I got in the air and heading in the right direction, I could breathe a little easier. My confidence began to return. I had to trust that I planned well, that the winds aloft wouldn't veer me off course, and air traffic control would be helpful. I relaxed a little in my seat and looked over my left shoulder out the window at the clear blue sky and the green earth below, and suddenly the feeling of awe flushed through my body. I glanced down at the map I had strategically folded and secured on my lap and began to check the meticulous notes I had penciled in along the route I had traced with a yellow highlighter. So far, so good. I corrected my heading, adjusted the throttle, and tuned into the airport frequency, and listened to the radio chatter, ticking down the miles and minutes when I would have to speak. Ada Tower, Cessna 3380 Juliet, student pilot, 10 miles southwest at 3,000 for approach to runway 18. Copy, Cessna 80 Juliet, continue on course. Advise when you have airport in sight. Copy Tower, airport in sight. Copy 80 Juliet, turn left 270 and enter the left downwind for runway 18. I was relieved to see that I was the only plane in the airspace at the time. All I needed to do was what I'd practiced so many times before. I came in a little fast, but managed to slow down in time to touch down. A little hard, but not a huge thump. And it was only when I taxied to the ramp, parked the plane, and climbed out of the cockpit that I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. I topped off the tank, hopped back in the cockpit, taxied back to the runway, and waited. November 3380 Juliet, cleared for takeoff. This time, I was a lot less nervous. I was so excited to get back and tell everyone how it went. My flight instructor had been listening to me on his portable air-to-ground radio, and air traffic control recorded my route, and they printed it out to commemorate the moment. They were there to support me, but I had to make that flight on my own, and I was ecstatic. I was doing it. I was on my way to getting my pilot's license. After passing the written exam and completing the 10 more hours of additional training, night landings, another longer cross-country flight, basic instrument navigation, I was now ready for the last step, the practical exam with the flight examiner. Like my first solo cross country, I felt confident, but I still had butterflies in my stomach, almost a feeling of dread, thinking about all those students who failed by forgetting one little step. I heard that examiners can be pretty intimidating, but this one seemed easygoing. He didn't expect perfection. All I had to do was demonstrate that I could perform the maneuvers correctly and safely. When I completed the pre-flight checklist to his satisfaction, the examiner squeezed into the right seat of my tiny plane and jotted down a few notes. Then he said in an upbeat voice, "Okay, you're pilot in command. Let's go flying." Staring down at that 11,000-foot runway, waiting for clearance to take off, the thrill and excitement I once felt was gone. My heart was pounding and my brain was in pure focus mode. The takeoff went well. My airspeed and direction were steady. The examiner did not say a word except to say, "Okay, let's do some steep turns. Now, slow flight. Okay, your engine failed. What do you do?" "No, good job," or "You got that," like my instructor would say. His last command was, "Find the nearest radio tower and track toward it." Now, radio navigation was not my strongest skill, so I prepared for this. I took my right hand off the throttle and reached for the radio. I remembered to flip the switch to change frequencies, but for a second my mind went blank. What was the frequency? I turned the dial one click to the right when it came to me. Whew, that was close. Once I had the radio tuned and the plane on course, I started flying toward the marker, and the examiner said abruptly, "Return to the airport." I panicked. What did I do? What did I mess up? Turn around and go back can't be a good thing. I wanted to cry. I made extra sure that I did all the right things coming back, and other than a few radio calls to the tower, neither one of us said a word. My landing was smooth, despite the gusty crosswind. I let out a sigh of relief. At least I was able to end the flight on a good note. It wasn't until I parked the plane that the examiner turned to me and said, "Congratulations, great flight. I'll meet you in the airport office to sign all the paperwork for your license. And by the way, that was an impressive landing." I stayed in the cockpit for just a few minutes, overwhelmed by the feeling of awe and joy. It was official. I did it. I was now a certified private pilot. So what does this story about learning to fly have to do with my moving to the beach? I believe that our most powerful memories are etched into our brain by the feelings attached to them. The details might not be the same, but the feelings are. And now that I actually live at the beach, when I think about all that I went through to get here, I feel all the same feelings. There was the fear, self-doubt, and nervousness when I decided to leave my 20-year career and move to the beach, thinking, how is this all going to work? And second-guessing myself, do I really want to do this? And the what-ifs. What if I can't find another job or place to live? What if I get there and find out I don't want to live there at the beach after all? Then there was the safety and trust factor. I thought of my parents saying, "We have to get out of Pennsylvania. We have to move to the beach now," and seeing how they just left everything and did it. After they passed away, the fear of the unknown started to creep up on me. Where do I go from here? What's next? The beach was my safe place to go, to help me find peace and trust that if I truly wanted to move to the beach, everything I needed to support me would be there at the right time and place. Relaxing on the warm, soft white sand in awe of the glorious Gulf Coast sunset, I could hear the beach speaking to my soul. Paige, even though on the outside you might feel uncertain, trust what you feel inside. You know this is what you want. And never forget, I'll always be here for you. What I'll never forget was the thrill I felt the first morning I woke up in our beach house, just before sunrise. I poured some coffee into a travel mug, opened the front door, and took a step out onto the small covered porch with the wooden two-seater swing attached to the ceiling, just barely moving back and forth in the coastal breeze. My brand new aqua blue beach cruiser propped up in the corner next to Ernie's that was slightly worn from the salt air. I closed my eyes. I could hear the ocean. I could smell it. And when I opened my eyes and looked down the street, I could see it. The beach was right there. I remember hopping on my bike, setting my coffee mug into the cup holder perched on top of the handlebars, and pedaled straight down to the beach. I plopped down in the cool sand, focusing my eyes on the ball of bright orange and yellow sunshine that was rising above the ocean. I'm sure there were a few beach walkers nearby, but I felt like I was the only one there, sitting alone, staring at the ocean in awe, my entire being overcome with joy and gratitude. I knew I was meant to be here. This beach is where I belong. So now you know why I get so excited about plains and beaches. I'm curious, is there an event in your life that is so memorable that you feel it? Whether it's fear and trepidation or thrill and joy, I'll be willing to bet that the beach is there somewhere. And while I'm on the topic of feelings, if you're craving more beach in your life, I am thrilled to announce that my newsletter is coming soon. In it, I'll be sharing more about my beach life, future podcast episodes, and beach-related topics like the top must-visit beaches, the best reef-safe sunscreen, beach music, and events. Think of it as a little virtual sun and sand in your inbox. To sign up, go to my website, thebeachspeaks.com, and click the newsletter button. The beach is speaking. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Beach Speaks. If you liked what you heard, share the podcast with another beach lover. And speaking of sharing, I want to know how the beach is speaking to you. To record a message, just go to my website, thebeachspeaks.com, click the voicemail button, it's super easy, and I'll play it on the show. And if more beach is what you crave, visit thebeachspeaks.com or follow The Beach Speaks on Facebook and Instagram, where I post all my gorgeous sunrise photos and videos. It's another way for you to reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. The beach is speaking. Are you listening?